Hello, everyone, and welcome to One in Six Supports Friday group. We are welcoming Danielle, who is going to be talking with us. She is from Sensory Wellness and talking about sensory regulation, as well as Priscilla, who is assisting over here. Priscilla Leto and Danielle
Amster.
Amster. So thank you so much for coming. We had the pleasure of having them donate their time and talents to our Mother's Day event, which people really appreciated. It was really wonderful, and we had scheduled this after. Uh, I was going to say the aftermath. No, whatever. But we have them here today. We're very fortunate. Sorry.
The follow-up.
The follow-up. That's what I was. Yeah, it's early and it's Friday. So we are going to start, and we're going to have some demos as well. And yeah, we're going to get started. So thank you so much for coming. I just want to remind everyone who's on the Zoom that this is being recorded, and it will be put on our One in Six Support YouTube page, that if you want to mention anything about your child, but you don't want you or your child's child to be identified, just be mindful of that, mentioning their name or identifying information if that's something that is of concern to you. And that's about it. Thank you so much, Danielle and Priscilla, and we will get started.
Okay, thank you so much for having us, and we really actually enjoyed very much that Mother's Day event. It was
Good.
really beautiful.
So
I
good.
recognize some people from there.
And did you see the news segment on it?
So I did,
Well,
I
yeah,
did. So that was a really big deal. So
over here.
it's true.
Yes, that's gonna put us on the map. Oh, there we go.
So thank you so much for having me here. And I guess you'll get to see the screen in the background a bit, and the people here live can see up here. So the topic today we're going to talk about is regulation and co-regulation. So this is a really big topic. I think probably in 2026, probably everyone on planet Earth is dysregulated somewhat. The world is definitely a more overwhelming place from a sensory perspective, all the lights and the sounds and the information that's constantly overloading us. But for our kids in particular, this is a very big topic that we want to discuss. So I would say feel free to throw out any questions in the middle. I feel like it helps us to keep on target with what people would like to know.
And please feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question to ask people who are on Zoom.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so we're going to talk about regulation. So just a bit about who I am, so you know where I'm coming from. So I have a company called Sensory Wellness, where we work with all ages. Our population is all ages, basically from ages 3 through 103. And we have lots and lots of clients throughout all those age ranges, lots of teenagers and adults as well, which is unusual in the sensory world. We are a group of self-regulation specialists supporting all these age ranges. And the work that we do, all of us are occupational and physical therapists, so we all have a strong background in neurology and behavior, and we've been working for a long time. And we take a very individualized, holistic approach in the work that we do. So what I always say is that the world today is finally coming around to understanding the mind-body connection. And what I say is we actually take it a bit further, and we say that it's actually mind-body unity. You cannot separate the mind and the body. It really all functions together. So that is a big feature of the work that we do. Should I bring that thing to switch it, or come on in, come sit down?
Everybody wants food. There's food in the fridge, in the kitchen, so you can bring it here.
Okay.
Please,
Okay.
because I
Yeah, come on in. We can move the table over a bit.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm myself, I'm an occupational therapist. I graduated from Columbia University with my master's in the end of 2000, so I'm working a little over 25 years. And I founded this company about 10 years ago, specifically to get deeper at the root causes of all of this work. A lot of the work that we do with our kids and with ourselves tends to be to keep us going for now and more compensatory. And our goal is really to figure out what's going on. So today we're going to discuss root causes of self-regulation, and this applies to all of us. This applies to our neurotypical and our neurodiverse populations, all ages, and we see a lot of people who have anxiety, trauma, PTSD, executive functioning challenges, and the like. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about is understanding behavior through the nervous system. Because really, our goal is to try to help our children to stop learning to cope. Like learning to working to cope all day long is exhausting and it never ends. So, what we always try to do, and I always say, our job is to make life easier. That when we see our kids and they're working so hard all day, we want to make it that naturally they can actually enjoy life and not be coping. So, that is going to be a main thing. Okay, so when we take a look at the brain and the body together, we can help our individuals feel more connected and feel safer and more comfortable in their body. We're going to get to the big stuff now. Okay, so when we take a look at individuals with self-regulation, what we want to take a look at is how much of this person needs to have their system just calmer and more even-tempered, right? And how much of this is that developmentally we don't have the maturity in our system to do all of that. So what we want to do is we want to talk about coming from the bottom up, helping to build up the body system to really be able to have the capacity for all these things as opposed to just coping. And I think we're going to get a bit. Let's skip this for now. Okay, let's keep moving. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is really what I want to talk about today. So regulation, when people talk about self-regulation, often they think that it means that we're going to have ourselves and our children in like a calm, nice, even, organized behavior, but that's not the reality of life, not for them and not for us, right? And that's not how it is. So what I want to talk about is how regulation is not about being calm all of the time. It's about being able to shift between stress and calm in our lives, right? So our nervous system has two states of being, right? So it's commonly known as fight or flight and freeze and rest and digest, right? So we have these two systems right over here. So from a neurological place, we call this our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. So what's interesting to know is that we can't be in both of these at the same time. We can go back and forth, but we can never be in both, right? So I can get up in the morning and be so stressed because my alarm didn't go off and now I'm late and now I'm running around. And then I could realize actually, actually everyone was ready on time today. And now I can sit and have my coffee and I can be calm. And we can go back and forth all day long, but we can't be in both at the same time. And the reason that this is important is because our goal is not to be in a calm, happy, regulated, as we would say, state all the time. It's the ability to move. Like when we say regulation, it's actually a verb, right? It's being able to move from one state to the other. So I have to be able to sit in traffic and be really worried, oh my goodness, I'm going to be late for the presentation today. And then I have to be able to come in and say, oh, there's plenty of time and there's lovely people here and regulate. And then I have to be able to say, I can sit and be nice and relaxed with my coffee, but then I can also get up and go. So we want to be able to move back and forth. And that's really what regulation is. And I think this is really important because when we think about the goal as trying to be calm all of the time, that's just not reality. And then we're constantly working and working and working when really the goal is to be able to move back and forth. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Ride the waves.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. We have to be able to like get pulled out and feel stressed, but then come back and then go sit on the beach with our drink and then come back. And that's how it is, right? And that's the reality of life. And when we realign our goals this way, we start to realize that we can shift our parents and ourselves away from constantly trying to reduce the stress, right? Constantly trying to put out fires. This is going on. You just need to calm down. Just follow this instruction. Just we're in the store. Just do what you need to do. And it reframes it. Instead of avoiding those difficult moments, we can actually move this into a skill-based type of thing because it really is a skill to be able to ride this back and forth. Okay. Okay, and when we do this, it reduces fear and anxiety, both for our kids and ourselves. Like a lot of times we have this expectation that our kids, whatever age they are, whether they're children or adults, that they should be able to just hold themselves together all the time. Or for those of you who are in environments, when they say, hold yourself together for 80% of the time, right? I mean, I'm sure that's familiar to a lot of people. But when we take away from avoiding the stress and avoiding that meltdown, but really being able to move through it, and to helping the children not just how to be calm right now, but how to actually move through this fluidly. And being able to do this type of work is a long-term investment because throughout life, we all have these types of situations. Okay, so when we talk about regulation in this way, we want to talk about how this is possible. That's the first thing we want to talk about. right? And we're going to talk about specifically today is co-regulation, our regulating with our children. So let's talk a bit about how we learn to regulate to begin with, right? We have our babies and they're born, and let's take typical development, right? Your baby is born, they don't know how to self-regulate, right? So your 6 month old is not calming themselves down. How many times do we get in the car and we're driving around and trying to avoid all the stop signs and the lights? So we can keep getting them calm, or we're out there with the stroller and it's a hurricane and we're like going anyway, or we're doing the bounce, forever and ever and ever. And we consider that not a developmental delay, right? Our babies don't need to be doing those things. So in general, when we talk back a little bit about like the body and the mind, and we can even scale back and include lots and lots of skills besides self-regulation, that's the way that our bodies work. When we talk about this mind-body connection, the first, let's say, 2 years of life are all about body development, right? So your baby is learning to roll and crawl and walk and speak, manipulate objects, learn how their body interacts with the world. So they're dropping their Cheerios and learning about gravity 50 million times off the high chair, and then they themselves are falling and getting up and falling and getting up and learning how their body interacts with gravity, right? All of that is happening, right? So your child is not self-regulating at that stage. They don't have good auditory processing. They're not following multiple step directions, right? They don't have any executive functioning. They don't put away their toys nicely at 12 months old. This is just not something that we expect. But from the perspective of understanding self-regulation, this is really important because we need to understand how self-regulation develops. So at these stages, when the children don't have those higher level skills, when we don't think of them as developmentally delayed because they're not, right? It's not a delay yet. But then when we see an older child, we say, oh, they should have those skills already. So what's happening in the interim? So just from like a little sciencey perspective, because that's the world that I come from. So that first 2 years of life really is about learning how to move in space. Like we talk about rolling and jumping and crawling and manipulating things. It's learning how to posture ourselves, to sit, to stand, to move, and to stop, right? How many of our kids, they go, 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 and then they crash, to be able to move and to stop, to be able to use accurate pressure on things. All of that is learning about their own bodies. And what happens is when that child becomes more comfortable with themselves, slowly we see them moving out into the world and interacting with the world. And that is typical development, right? So what happens along that way is all that information that comes about from taking in sensory information and manipulating things in the world, what's happening on a neurological levels, all that information goes up into the brain and up through the lower levels of the brain or the higher levels of the brain, and it spurs off brain growth. So that's how the nerves start. You get all these pathways growing. So before that, the brain is actually immature. Like there's not a lot of action going on. But that physical development and that sensory development is what actually grows the brain. And that is when the brain is ready now to have these higher level skills, right? That's what happens. So when we look at our older kids or our adults throughout the whole age range, we can actually look at people's systems and say, like, you are missing these parts of physical development. And that's why those parts of your brain are actually not mature enough to even have these skills. So it's a very important piece because when we ask our kids to be in more of the coping mode and compensating, so we say when you're feeling stressed, you should walk out of the room. You should take a deep breath. I was working with a woman yesterday who is in her low 50s with tremendous executive functioning challenges. And she said to me, who reminds me to look at the list? And then the alarm goes off. And who reminds me to check the alarm and to check which list? Like she said, it's just not possible. And people are always saying to her, if you just did it, it would work. And she's like, no, it doesn't work that way. And when we looked at her body, really, there were so many immaturities in the way she held herself and the way she moved. And she's so uncomfortable in her own body. And that's really a sign of immaturity. It's not a sign necessarily of dysfunction, even. It's a sign that your system didn't mature properly. And so, how can we expect them to have these skills, And we do need these competitions. We do need these things. And all of us use these things. How many times does my alarm go up on my own phone and I have my to-do lists? We all need that. But at the same time, we have to have the physical capacity to handle all these things. Does that make sense?
Can I give a
Yeah.
very real
Yeah.
example? My son had extremely low muscle tone, and people who had his syndrome historically were very, very delayed because the low muscle tone kept the babies in a very floppy state where they couldn't really move. With the growth hormone, that's what they started using for to build up muscle. And they found if you started the growth hormone at day one of getting the diagnosis with with the low muscle tone and everything else, that because the babies are able to move more, there was way fewer cases of severe delays because they were able to, because of the strength of the body, they're able to explore their environment more, which then allows them to cognitively move forward. So this is just a very real scientific thing that has happened with Prader-Willi syndrome, for example. So growth hormone is the treatment from early on to help with the cognitive
Right. And I
development.
think what's often underappreciated is
Yeah.
that those experiences actually grow the brain.
Yes.
Like it's not just that you have more experiences, so now you know more, but it's actually what spurs the brain growth. So our kids need to go through those stages to develop the ability to develop this brain capacity. So this was a really good example.
Just
Yeah.
curious, does an interruption like my son at 13 months old had epileptic seizures and febrile seizures, and I saw like a huge regression.
Right.
Does that, because I can't wait to hear more, but I know that his sensory regulation, even there's a whole team that came over last night, they were like, wow, he is so sensory seeking. Do you think there's a correlation between, because that to me arrested his development?
Right.
Like it was traumatic,
Right.
and he was on medication. So
Right.
just curious.
So this is a really important point, and it's relevant when you have something like seizures or some medical event, but it's also relevant for all of the rest of the populations as well. When we do our evaluations to see what's going on with our kids and our adults, with our clients, we want to see how much of what's going on is that their nervous system needs to be just relaxed and brought down, and how much is developmental. So when you have a situation where there are seizures, so it's has the capacity to be interrupting both, right? So when we said earlier that you can be in fight or flight or rest and digest, so if a child goes through an experience that's traumatic on them, like a medical event like that, then it can actually put them in what we call like more of like a trauma state, whether you want to call it big T, little t, however you want to call it. And so you can't be in protection and survival and growth and development at the same time. So if the body stays in this protective place, it prevents the ability for the body to grow and develop, which is why if you take, extreme trauma cases in countries where there's not enough food and there's famine, you'll often see people are smaller, like
Yeah.
even their physical development
Yeah.
gets arrested. So in our case, we're not talking about, not enough food, but we're talking about that it halts the development of their brains because they're just in survival mode. So even when we have situations of, let's say, complex trauma, when children grow up in homes that are dysfunctional for them, not supportive enough, and the like, or a lack of food and things like that, if their body is struggling to survive, they're going to have a lack of growth and development. So that's the case when you have a medical trauma like that, where it could do both. It actually could impact the brain in a real way, and you could have that development halted in that way or affected in that way, but also the trauma piece. So when we do our evaluations, we are very careful to evaluate how much of that, because you can see in the body how much of that is like that their nervous system needs to calm and how much they need to develop. So even in cases where we have more of a more extended trauma, like a complex trauma like that, we need to see how much is that their system needs to be re-regulated and how much we need to grow and develop, because you can have like, and there are many approaches that come from a body based, like a massage type thing or the like, where it calms the nervous system. But if the development does not kick in for them to own the ability to actually protect themselves, to own the ability when you fall that your arm goes out and reflexively holds you, and that same reaction that if you come too close to me, that I can push you away. Not that I need to push you away, but that my brain knows that I have the capacity for that. Same thing, if my balance is compromised, I don't have the ability to feel grounded quite in the same way. So if you don't have that physical capacity, you're going to lack that emotional capacity. Does that make sense? So often, like we had a young woman come in her low 20s. She was a typically developing girl, was in school typically along the way, a lot of sensory issues. And then she, over time, developed tremendous anxiety and social anxiety. So one of her things was that she and her sisters, they used to like to go to the mall. That was like a big thing in her family, and a big recreation thing. And she could last about 10 to 15 minutes in the mall before she started losing it. And I think we've all been there, right? And what, she was saying, I just don't know why, I just can't handle it. And then when we took a look at her system, her balance and ability to hold herself up was so poor. It was almost like I could blow on her and she would go over. And so she was constantly sitting like this and like this, and everyone took it as anxiety from a mental health perspective, which it did become, let's be clear. But her balance abilities were so poor. So over time, let's think of her as a child playing on the playground. If she gets bumped, she's going to fall over. You're in high school and kids are taking things out of their lockers and bumping into each other in the hallway. You're going to go over. Now you're in the mall, you're just used to like always guarding. So if your body always has to guard like that, then what happens? You get that same tightness that you would get when you're stressed. You get this, your diaphragm holding up. You can't take a deep breath. All of these things happen. So we could come and we could do all these nice nervous system relaxation interventions, like all these things you see, vagus nerve things, and that's all appropriate. But if we don't correct for her ability to posturally hold herself up, have good body awareness, and know that she can be safe, then she's going to constantly have to cope with that. Like she's going to constantly have to handle it and put in intervention, take some deep breaths and all these things. But if we build her system up to actually have that resilience that she needs, and also then grow her brain to have these capacities for self-regulation, then, she can put even these strategies into place. Like we all have times we go somewhere and we feel nervous and anxious and we have to, say, you're okay, Danielle, you can handle this. But at the same time, we need to have the capacity to actually do it. That makes sense. So from a regulation place, all these things need to be looked at. So over time, like I said, I've been working for about 25 years. So as I've seen the field progress and the neuroscience kind of come in, and we see that we can actually change systems throughout the lifespan, like how we develop. So this has been the most exciting for me. And we've worked really hard to develop these kinds of strategies where we can really assess a person and say, how much is your nervous system going haywire for you, and how much is development. And when we come in with both, and we're going to talk about some techniques. That's why I have my squishy up here. I'm actually thinking for the demo, since it's being videoed, I don't know if anyone would want to be on the massage table in front of everybody. So maybe we'll do it like this. Almost coming up on the video. And we can use some of these techniques that can help both development and self-regulation at the same time. So when we talk about being trauma informed, this is really, I believe, what it means, being trauma informed. It's not just being sensitive and having awareness, but it's also about understanding how the body perceives things, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're going to get into some strategies here. And we're going to talk quickly. Maybe we'll move through some of the slides quickly so we can get more demo time in.
Talk about neuroception.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about co-regulation. We'll just summarize the slides all together. When we talk about co-regulation, so how do children learn to regulate to begin with, right? So we said that they have to go through these developmental stages, develop their neural capacity through moving through space and sensory information coming into their system and the like. But also, as we can feel in our bones, they need to have a stable parent or other adult in their lives that models this self-regulation, right? If we have a child living in a chaotic environment, I just spoke with a woman this morning who called me. She's also in her 40s or 50s, I don't remember. And she said she grew up in a very, very chaotic environment. And she said she started having panic attacks at 2 years old. This is just, she was telling me this morning, I haven't met her yet, but she said her whole system is wired up that way. So the importance of having co-regulators in our lives is developmentally appropriate. And I would say when we have children, whether they're small children or adult children, who have any sort of developmental delay, like we can, the same way we'll have that physical developmental delay or cognitive developmental delay, emotional developmental delay, right? We need to think of it socially, right? We need to think of it that this child might be 22 years old, but emotionally they might need the co-regulation at an 8-year-old developmental level. So we don't need to pull back on that. It's not a crutch for our kids. They need us, and we all need each other. I mean, that's why we're here in a support group, because we need this co-regulation in our lives. It's such an important feature of being human, right? So from a developmental place, did you want to ask something?
I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no, please.
That just struck me because I was wondering if the sort of outward verbal processing that many, say, neurodivergent people with ADHD need, is that an example of that sort of need for external co-regulation with someone.
Meaning what? Like, give me an example of that.
Like if you're really stressed about something and people are just like, you just put it out of mind, but yeah, that's a very neurotypical response, for example.
Okay.
And you're like, no, I have to talk to someone
Right.
about it. And it doesn't mean that, say by someone, I mean me, honestly. Like it doesn't mean that I know that I'm not, I haven't got some huge problem. It's just the way I or someone like me moves through the world, and so therefore would like, the need to verbally process something with someone else with
That co-regulation
Yes,
is helpful.
basically,
Yeah,
yes.
it is helpful
So
because
I
it
just
helps
agree.
us to join together with that. So let me explain a little bit how that works even, because maybe that will be more helpful for you. So when our children grow up, right, we co-regulate with them. So this concept of neuroception. So as OTs, we're always adding senses. Like remember when we were growing up, we had 5 senses, Now we have like 15, right? So OTs, I don't know, OTs, we always add proprioception, like a vestibular sense, your sense of your body in space and all these things, interoception, your sense of internal cues and all these things, right? So Dr. Stephen Porges, who's actually a researcher more in the mental health world, really, he developed the polyvagal theory, if anyone's familiar with that. So a lot of heads nodding on that one. He actually didn't appreciate that his work was going to be put into practice so quickly. It was really a very research-based thing. But he talks about another sense and he adds it into the fray of all the OT senses. So he talks about the word neuroception. So when we talk about neuroception, that's like your sense of vibe of other people. So if you're walking down the street and someone is just creepy, and you don't really know why. It's not like you can even figure out why, but they just give you a sense of like, I just need to cross the street right now.
Yeah.
And you should cross the street right now. So that's your sense of vibe. You can't always say what it's coming from, but you know it's there. So same thing where you meet someone and you automatically feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I knew you forever. We're like best friends, or I just connect with you. That's your sense of neuroception also. It's your sense of vibe. So when we are with our children, that sense of vibe that we give off, it's not just we're modeling for them. I take a deep breath when I'm stressed, and you should take a deep breath when you're stressed. It's actually really neurologically based. So one thing that we can do is we can speak about working on our own, ability to stay calm, and they will pick up that vibe from us. Did you want to say something or?
No,
No.
they're just really relieved because I do that all the time, and I wonder if that's the right thing. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
And I'm thinking about it in the opposite, feeling guilty
Right.
for being,
Right.
actually
Human,
my
for being
stress out
human.
this, and that having an impact on the kids. So,
But we call that human also.
Yes,
Right.
So we call that human. So give yourself space to be a person. None of us are in the angelic realm. So that is normal. But we can capitalize on this. And even more, we have something that we call mirror neurons where you actually pick up the vibe from others. So like this is classic when you have a baby and you like stick your tongue out at the baby, and then the baby slowly sticks his tongue out at you. Like you didn't tell them to do it. They're not following any like verbal instructions, but they just are mirroring you. So it's a really powerful tool for us as parents and also as friends and spouses and coworkers and all that with the world. Like when we want our clients to take a deep breath, I'm not going to say, okay, let's take a deep breath. I am just going to breathe. And then once we do that breath, they just automatically copy without thinking of it. And we can help train the nervous system without the need to, verbally tell people what to do. And I'll say, like, when we talk about mind and body, right? So even when we talk about the brain, like 5 to 10% of the brain is for cognition and thinking, right? The other 90+% is all automatic functions. So when we are trying to put strategies into place that are like, use this strategy, take a deep breath, realize you're like accessing these very high level pieces. Our body just needs to do that automatically. So in our practice, we call that ease, like being able to move through life with ease, because you have to do all the regular things with ease. You have to be able to sit in your chair without falling off. If you have to work hard to sit in your chair, you can't pay attention at all to what people are saying to you, whether it's a teacher or a friend.
Important point.
So-
Can you repeat that? Because that comes up all the time in school.
Right.
And elsewhere. So if you are not able to deal with this, sitting in a seat, you are not going to be able to learn.
Right. And this is just the reality. And so we have to make things easy. The hallmark of a developmental delay, physical, mental, emotional, social, whatever it is, the hallmark of that is when something is not easy. So I'm not talking about calculus, but when the easy things that should be easy are hard, that's the hallmark of developmental delay. So I would encourage you to believe that we can change that because we can. We know a lot about neuroscience today and how we develop. And some of the earlier slides were about reflex integration. These are they're not new things. Our bodies have always had reflexes, but we're understanding their application to development and we can capitalize on it. So like in our therapy sessions, like when we see kids or adults, we always say, you're not going to come here for years and years and years. I want you to see change every session or every 2 sessions. You should be able to see that change because if we're changing development, they might be small changes, a small postural change, a small movement change. But when you see that happen, you can track that physical development, which then translates into that emotional development. So it's very important. And I just want to say, just Alma, you mentioned this, so I feel like it's also an important point for our kids that are having trouble paying attention in class. And she was saying, and it's like, well, just pay attention. So first of all, if they're having so much trouble just sitting, how are they going to pay attention, right? If they're having trouble physically keeping their eyes focused, which so many of our kids have, tracking and other oculomotor issues, then if they're paying so much attention just trying to keep their eyes focused, how can they pay attention? And how many times have I seen kids that are in general ed but have these challenges, so it's less appreciated by the staff, and they're looking at the ceiling the whole time, but they're listening. They're even getting 100 on every test.
Yeah.
But the teacher's saying, you need to look at me. But for them, I can look at you, but then I can't hear a word you're saying. So,
And can I
yeah,
offer one more thing? That some of our kids stare longer than a
Right.
typical person.
right.
Neurotypical person, which is very off-putting to people socially, but that's another way of processing, like it's when people are staring, they're trying to gather information and it might take a little bit longer.
So it could be from a few different things, but you will see that commonly because any of these things could happen. So it could be that they have difficulty controlling their eyes and then they're doing that. It could be that they're just in a pause processing. And that's also, and pause is not bad, but it's a sign that things are not easy enough and we need to help that.
Right.
It could also be in a totally different realm. It could be a stress response, right? When we talk about someone undergoing stress, so the physiological reaction, right, is that our heart starts racing, our breath gets high and shallow, our muscle tone goes up, and we get this deer caught in headlights look. That's a real thing. We call that ocular lock. So the pupils dilate, and what happens is the muscles on every side of the eye lock. And so you have this ocular lock, that's a stress response. And we can see people, and if we're trained to look for this, we can see, like when we do our trauma informed work, if we start to see the eyes going that way, we pull back, because we need to respect that whatever that was, even if it was nothing, seemed like nothing for that person, that could cause them to go into that lock and even dissociate,
And do you need an instrument to see the
No.
ocular lock, or you can
No, you can
physically
see
just
that.
it?
Yeah, you can see that. And when you see that deer caught in headlights, you know it.
Okay.
So it could be so many different combinations of things. I would add one more thing, because this is also, I think, a big thing related to what you mentioned earlier about trauma and all these things. When we have our kids who are having trouble paying attention, and the teacher says something like you're saying, you knew this yesterday. I know you know this. I know you know this. You knew this yesterday, and all of that.
Yeah.
So sometimes when we look at the trauma responses, and remember, living in a body that has to work too hard and doesn't move with ease and doesn't do things with ease can be in itself a sort of trauma, because you're working harder than everybody else and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So when we see a child who either has trauma from the outside or from internally in that way, what happens is right, when we go through a trauma, right, what happens first, you have all those responses to your breath, your heart rate, your muscle tone, that ocular lock, all those things. The sensory systems go haywire. That's most of the time when we see hypersensitivity in our kids. That's most of the time what's going on. It's because their sense systems get heightened and all of that comes off, right? Now I can pay attention to you and everyone in this room, but I'm ignoring the shade and the angle of the mirror, like all of that's ignored. But if I go into stress mode, all of a sudden I see and I hear and I feel everything.
Vigilant.
Right? That's why in a movie, someone is in a traumatic situation and they hear the train whistle 4,000 miles away, right? Like everything is open. And when people recall trauma, it's not chronological. They can't think clearly. All thinking goes out the window and it's neurological. That part of the brain actually shuts off. If someone is getting attacked on the street, they can't be distracted by their grocery list or their math homework.
Yeah.
Right? So that part of the brain shuts off for efficiency. So when we see someone who is one day they know it and the other day they don't, we can also start thinking how stressed they are in that situation. If we bring their stress down, maybe they can think more clearly again.
Yeah.
There's so much.
No, this is very
Yeah, like I'm
enlightening.
So a couple of things. The first thing I'm thinking about is like when my son comes home, he is so tuned to needing water. So it'll be like he has to play with the dishes in the water or a water table. And I'm wondering if it's because he's been stressed out all day and this is now what you're saying is
The
like
release.
calming, a release. And it's interesting to me because I'm trying as a parent to teach him leader skills. So it's like I don't want him to just and maybe that's wrong, that's why I'm asking. I don't want him to just sit there and play with water for hours on end because it's like, there's so many other things that you can play with. But is it important for him, for me to be like this co-regulator, to give him that much time? I must also add, he has a speech delay. I mean, very severe. So I wonder, in terms of that, like, how does all that play together in terms of me wanting for him to do other activities, but then at the same time allowing him to regulate? Because I don't know what his day was like. I can't ask you,
Right.
how was your day? There's no conversation about that. So I I I I really try to follow his lead. It's like even yesterday, like I just let him wash it, like play with the dishes, play with the water for an hour, almost until dinner, hour and a half. But at the same time, I was thinking, is there something else that he should be doing? Like. So I just wonder in terms of this regulation piece, because I just see how calming it is for it. It's
Right.
like, oh God, this is what you need.
Right.
Can
I
you
guess-
repeat like what she's saying just briefly?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong in how I say it again.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a situation where the child finds playing with water very, very calming. So playing with the dishes, playing with the water table, and he comes home from school and he just needs to do that for an hour and a half. And you want to help him move out into other fun things to do with himself and games and play skills, but at the same time, this is where he's at. Does that make
100%,
sense?
That's it.
So the question is, do we let him play with the things or not? So first of all, I would say, first off the bat, trust your gut. Go with your gut. You're his mom. What you think needs to happen is probably what needs to happen. So I say that as a professional, you always go with the gut of the parents, So that's the first thing. But in terms of this, like I would look at it in two ways. Like, I was saying we need to look at the nervous system and how heightened it is, and then we need to look at the development. So helping him to regulate, right? When he comes home from this long day at school where he's really stressed and he doesn't have the verbal ability to share with you what happened and get support for that. So we need to help him to regulate, just down regulate. At the same time, you want to develop his play skills, and that's really growth and development. So when we talk about looking at a person's system, how much is that their nervous system needs to calm, and how much is it that they need to grow and develop new things? We can look at them both separately and together, So sometimes we can do them together and sometimes not. So it might be in your case, it sounds like your gut feeling is like, I just let him play because he really needs that to calm down. So it sounds like that's probably not the time to work on growth and development. It's probably the time to let him down regulate. And like we said, when you're in that state of stress, you can't think clearly. The part of the brain that thinks, learns, and remembers is not on. I always say to people, when you come for therapy with us, nothing should be horrible or painful or uncomfortable. It could be not your favorite thing, but once you go in that state, I say partly it's because we're so nice, but really I say the real reason is if I put you in that state, your body's not going to learn anything, so it's a waste of time. So if he needs that time to regulate, you might choose to separate that, you know what I'm saying? And developmentally, those types of play skills, I often find come from a lack of sense of self and your own body awareness and comfort within yourself. So when I talk about developing social skills and also play skills, so much of it, I like to dial back more root cause wise, to really like work on the person and how they feel comfortable with themselves and manipulating things with the world. Because like we talked about in typical development, like the baby develops their own sense of self before they can go out and play with toys and before they can play with others. So if I talk about just the development of social skills, and we can include play in that, right? That baby is running around, moving and crawling and dropping their Cheerios, like we said, and falling and engaging with the world, but it's me, me, me. And that's normal and healthy. That's the only time in your life you get to be that selfish, right? That self-centered. It's all about me. So that baby is developing me, 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 and that's appropriate. And they can't even look outside themselves because you, my mom, you're just there for me. And you are also there for me. And that's how it should be, right? Like that's how it is. And for our kids that are stuck in that developmental stage from whatever reason, it's still about me. And we want them to think out of the box. But if they can't yet, we need to really look closely at that. So what happens developmentally, right? So then this child starts developing themselves, and now they're in preschool. So now, previous to this, you could see parallel playing. I play with my toys here, you play with your toys there, but we're not really playing with each other.
Nope.
But then when the child reaches a stage that they feel really comfortable with themselves, they've developed that map of their body and their brain, they know where they are, they know they can move, they know what they can do, they know what they can't do. Now all of a sudden, they're in the kitchen center in their preschool classroom, and you be the mommy and I'll be the baby, or you be the daddy and I'll be the baby, and now we could start playing together because I have enough sense of self that I can connect with you. So, and I would take it even a step further. Once the child can now play with another child that way, then they learn what that feels like, right? And then they can look at those two and say, they're playing in the house section. You're the mommy and you're the baby. Can I come in and be the daddy? Can I break into that too? And you start to learn socially, but these are developmental things. These are developmental stages. So when we look at our kids, it's the same thing like you're saying in terms of play skills and mature play skills. So some of it is a fine motor issue and a gross motor issue. Let's put that aside. But and the cognitive issues. But aside from that, in order to engage with objects in the world, you have to have a good sense of yourself. So sometimes we jump the gun and we go to exit 15 on the highway and we're like, you're going to play with other kids, you're going to be in this social skills group. And these are not bad things. Let me be clear. We need all these things. But when we build up the foundation for it, then they could use it. It's the same thing like using a coping strategy. So if we're in a social skills group and I know when I come in, I say to you, hello, how was your day? And how was your day? And this is how we share. And this is how I go into a restaurant and order. And we need all those skills. So this is a good thing. But if we also come in and build the foundation for I have a good sense of me, now I can connect with you and really ask you how your day was, and appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look back, we can see that. And I'll just add back to what we were saying before in terms of being able to pay attention in the classroom and not, and what state are you in, fight or flight, freeze, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I often think of this like our kids that are either they have complex trauma or they just life is too hard developmentally. They're going through stages that are too hard. So there is a constant stress. So it is like a complex trauma in many ways. I often liken those kids to having a brownout. Like when I was a kid, we used to have lots of blackouts. I don't know where you live, but now you don't have that as much. I guess we have better systems. And that would be like the lights would go out or the lights would not. So when I went to Columbia University in Manhattan, so it was upper Manhattan. So I guess socioeconomically, they felt when there wasn't enough power going on in the summer, they would lessen the power by us. So the lights would go dim. And I don't know if that was socially and politically appropriate to say, but this is what happened to us. So, and your air conditioning would be on, but it would be and when you would have that, the electricity's on, but it's on and off, on and off, on and off. So when kids are going through a stage where they're constantly in this stress and you knew this yesterday in class, you knew this math problem, why don't you know it today? Sometimes it's like that, where I can kind of pull it out, but I can't really pull it out, if that makes sense. And I'll say even in terms of the stress factor, I remember years and years ago, and I worked in a more sensory gym type environment, and I put this 10-year-old girl, I imagine she was about 10, on a ball, and she was so anxious from being up there. And I had tried at the time, which I don't do this type of work anymore, to just distract her and ask her some questions. So I said, oh, what color is your room? And she's like, green. And her mother's looking at me like, green, and what color is your house? And she's like, gray. And her mother's like, what? And then I take her off the ball and I said, what color's your room? She says, pink. And what color's your house? White. And her mother's like, yeah, that's reality, because she kind of knew that she has to answer and it's a color. And there's a color out there that I should be saying, but she couldn't think clearly enough. So sometimes that is also the case. And
Yeah.
so that regulation piece is so important for learning, both from that heightened nervous system place where you need to be stress-free enough to be able to focus, and from a development place where you have the capacity to learn. So that's what I would say. So back to the co-regulation piece, and then we'll maybe go into a little bit of demo because I think we only have a couple minutes left, and this is a good one for people to take home. I would say being able to capitalize on those mirror neurons and neuroception without stressing yourself that you need to be perfect, because this is not reality for anyone. Is a big skill. So what I want to discuss with you now is you might be familiar with the term proprioception, right? In terms of body awareness and all these things. So the classic example is if I close my eyes and I put my hand here, I can copy here. I can do this, I can do this, right? Because I have this map in my brain of where my body is and how it's all connected. But when we talk about having a good sense of your body, like we talked about that as an underlying piece of all this, and we talk about body awareness, you might hear that term thrown around a lot. So in the way that I develop the techniques in sensory wellness and the way that I teach it is that body awareness has two components. One is straight up proprioception. If I touch you here, you feel it here. And if I touch you here, you also feel it here, and also here, and also here, and also here. So our tissues, like our muscles and our joints and every part of the stuff of our body has what we call proprioceptors, right? But there's a very much clearer way now to understand that and to evaluate that than before. So that's just like, here I am. And that's the technique we're going to use today. The other way of having body awareness is there were some earlier slides there about reflex integration, understanding how we learn to move and learn to sit and learn to posture ourselves and all that, use our body. The way we use our body maps out our brains. So for example, there's a reflex that we have as babies called your spinal galant, where if you're touched on the back, you do that kind of a movement. So I always say, because we're all amazing parents and we have our babies in tummy time on the floor all the time, right? So if you imagine your baby in tummy time on the floor and the fight or flight comes in, so some wild animal, otherwise known as the 2-year-old brother, comes into the room and starts to go over and like poke the baby. So that baby has this reflexive response where they jump, right? And so that reflex is there for a purpose. All of these reflexes, these primary reflexes, are there for two reasons. One, you're going to hear the same binary discussion over and over. One is for protection and survival. They jump like that, scares off the 2-year-old long enough for the mother to help them, right? Because the baby can't run away. The second reason is for development, for growth and development. What the baby learns is that we can move in this plane. We can flex the side of our body like this, which they didn't know that they had before. Now all of a sudden we don't just have a front and a back, we're three-dimensional. We have a side, and our shoulder is connected to our hip like this, and now we have this map of these two move together. So initially it moves reflexively, and then it moves voluntarily, and then it moves in sophisticated ways. I can lean here, the angle might change, but I know that they're connected. So that's another level of body awareness. Today we're going to talk about the first one, and we're going to talk about this. So this is just like a squishy from Amazon. People always ask me, which one is that? I'm like, this is the one called Toast. To me, it looks like pound cake, but
Yeah.
whatever. We could call it Toast if we like. I'm not an ad for Amazon, but this is a really good one to demonstrate this, okay? So if we talk about, this is going to be like our body, right? A part of our body. If we give deep pressure, like so classically is like, we're going to give you a massage, we're going to give you deep pressure, we're going to give you a deep hug. This is what it looks like, right? We give that deep pressure and it feels really good. And then we're squished, okay? And then the ability for the body to calm down from that or regulate, use that, is a little chaotic. Like it comes out at whatever place it comes out in whatever order it comes out. So it's nice. And when we give a deep pressure massage, it's nice. The way I term it is I call it return touch. So a lot of the OT world and the sensory world is focused on what input I give to you. I'm going to give you deep pressure. But I like to think of it as the opposite. I want to see what I get back, and that's where the magic happens. So if I give you
Excuse me, I'm so
Yeah.
excuse me, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Alma, could you possibly just like slide the computer a little bit so we can
where?
see the presenter?
You can't see it?
Um,
Oh, there.
You're on.
let's see.
She's on.
She's only,
Is
let
that
me
better?
see. Oh, thank you. That's so great. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Here it looks fine both ways. So, okay, we're good. Just before we talked about giving deep pressure looks like this, and then it's kind of squished in and has to come out at its own level, right? So as OTs, very often we focus on the input we give. So in my world, in the sensory wellness world, in the Danielle Amster world, I focus on the return. So this is the return in terms of many, many areas, like the way I use my voice, right? I might come in really calm and speak to my child like that. And that sounds really nice. And one child will calm down and the other child will smack me in the face. Right? And that's what happens. So it's not about what I'm giving you, it's about what your response is back. And I need to give you what you need. Right? So it's the same thing with touch. So when we do this type of touch and we give this deep pressure, what we want to do is slowly allow the body to release back. And it's that return that teaches the body, you can tighten up. And look, I'm guiding you. You can also release. There's a lot of trauma implications here as well, because we talked about when someone's in trauma and they have that heightened muscle tone, everything tightens. We can guide the body to come into this more open state to see that they're safe doing it. If we just come in and like, you're going to be fine, come back out, it can feel scary. And it seems so minute, but really this is where the magic happens. Trust me on that. So we really want to come in when we give deep pressure and slowly hit all the areas in between and let it slowly come back out. And when we talk about regulation, and we said you have two states, you don't want to go from one to the other, one to the other. It's about fluidly moving between the states. When we talk about everything happens first in the body and then later on happens in the mind, right? That's how natural development is. Your 2-year-old, your 1-year-old is not self-regulating, but they do later. So if we teach the body developmentally how to regulate itself, then what happens is it will naturally start to come in that emotional regulation. So even if you do this on a squishy like this in front of your child and you show them this, that just that visual ability to slowly come in and slowly come out. And a lot of you are probably saying, my kid would just be like, boom. And that's right. That is exactly it. But this is a pretty disarming way to teach this. So a lot of times it's just like, okay, so come in and out slowly a little bit. You don't have to be so slow. And I have like my whole bag of squishies that I use for different things. Some of them return faster, some slower. You can do your own squishy research. My kids were like, don't call it that. It's creepy. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. But my own kids, I'm saying, but this is a real way to teach regulation. And we can also, layer it with breathing, right? We can breathe in
as it's coming,
and we can
I
breathe
just
out.
automatically
Right.
start breathing slowly.
Right, because those mirror neurons are going to kick in.
Yeah.
And we can have, like, I'm going to pull out another one because I know we're almost done. So here's like another popular one that people have this like popcorn, or they have cappuccino ones for your older kids. So if this is on a table, we'll just make my hand a table. We can just have it around that we slowly practice coming up and down. Like it doesn't have to be an exercise. It can just be around. We can do it with 2 hands, we can do it with 1 hand, but what I would say is what's really nice is we can do this with our own kids or ourselves or whomever. When we give them that pressure and we come in, and everyone could try this on themselves, if you slowly sink it, there's no squeezing, it's just sinking. That actually activates those proprioceptors in a much more active way and slowly release. So same thing, if we come in and we stay at that depth, let's say we come down to here and then we slowly release. It's like a huge release on the body. So let's do that again. If we just do one spot, everyone can just sink in, and it's not a grab. It's just sinking in. And what it actually does is actually hydrating all the fascia that's in there. So you're actually hydrating all the systems. It's like taking one of those big industrial yellow sponges and then letting it release, and it fills with water when it's in the water. See, it's a good one. So it's that same thing. And if you want to do it in a massage form, you would come sink in and then stay at that level. And if we bring it all the way down to the hands or to the wrist, and then we could slowly release, it's a huge game changer from that deep pressure. So if you just do like a classic deep pressure on your own, right, that's like nice. But now do it this way, where you sink in and you come down at that level, and then you let go at the end. It's much, much, much more regulating on the system. And we could go on 1,000 techniques like this. But like the other day, last week when we were here for the Mother's Day event, we were doing these like return touch type massages. That's why when people had it, it's so different than just that deep pressure, because it's actually teaching your body to regulate.
And we had someone else who was doing gentle somatic healing touch. I don't know if you talked with her at all, but that's
in that back.
in the back,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's what she was doing. I
Right.
think.
Right.
It wasn't described that way. but
Right.
it
Well,
sounds-
this return taught, right. I mean, that's, it's funny when I hear people talking about that, I'm like, you got that from me because I made that up. So, but made it up is a loose term. But, really clinically, I really see this as the best way. I mean, that return in all ways, like I said, with your voice, with your posture, with your touch. And it doesn't always have to be that you lay down and give you a nice deep massage. It can be that when your child comes home from school, you just do that with their hand and that slow release. Do that on their arm when you see them. That's slow release. Do that on their chest. It's very centering, or it could be triggering. You have to know your child. Anything on ourselves. I all the time I give out the squishies. I always say, like, you can put your hands on the couch and slowly sink in and slowly release. You can do it on your thighs, right? You're sitting, slowly release. That type of work, it's very, very regulating on the body and then on the mind. So, and we can use that both for calming the nervous system and also, as clinicians, we use it in the right places. We can promote growth and development and posture and all these kinds of things. So, in any case, that's what I would say. I know we're like out of time, but I'm happy to take questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you work? Like, how does it work if somebody wanted your service? And number one, is it covered by insurance? And number two, is it like a consultation? How does it?
Right. Okay, so for anyone here, and this is for the public, not just anyone here, but if people have questions, I offer free consultations to everyone, a 15-20 minute consultation. So people call me all the time, in my schedule all the time, these calls. That's why I said I took a call this morning before I came here, just to, see what your story is and see if it's relevant and ask all your questions. So if anyone has particular questions, they can ask me. In general, the way our services work, so we have offices in Rochelle Park, the border of Paramus, so right by the Garden State Plaza Mall, right behind it, and then one in New City in Rockland County and one in Brooklyn. So I myself do all the evaluations in all the offices, and the price of that is $550 right now. And like that's where I sit down and help you understand, like, how much is your nervous system, how much is development, what that would look like, how we put that together, and what progress you would start to see first. Like first you'd probably see this, and then you'd see that and all of that. So that's the evaluation. And then we have two models in which we do intervention. So the more classic model is that we see people weekly. Most of our sessions, probably the average is an hour. We see a lot of people for an hour and a half or 2 hour sessions, sometimes more than once a week. And that, is a classic model. And the therapy itself, it's a very regulating environment. All of our offices, whether they're in Brooklyn or in New Jersey or Rockland County, they're all like, everyone has their own room, their own space. The parents can obviously come in, but it's not a shared space. It's not chaotic. It has a more like spa-like feel. Big windows. I never use electric lights. It's always like natural light. And we do a lot of work on a massage table, a lot of work on the beanbag. We have balls and balance boards, but it's a very regulating type of thing. And because it's body-based, we don't need to talk. Or, a lot of our kids and our adults, all our clients, it's easier to come because it's just your body doing things. You don't have to work really hard to do anything. And when people work hard, I'm like, stop working so hard. We don't work hard here. So a lot of times, like, our clients will listen to music or a podcast or an audio book. A lot of our clients fall asleep, but it's neurological. We can do the work while people are sleeping. So it's nice like that. We also have a program that we call our Boost program, which we do intensive. So that we see our clients either 3 days in a row, 5 days, 10 days. We can customize that for 3 hours at a time so that you can see this boost in your progress.
Okay.
So some people just do that, go home with home exercises. We send videos, or they will combine it where they'll do weekly and then get a boost. Or let's say in the summer is very popular for boost because people have more flexibility in their schedule. Also, sometimes people say by September, I need them to be in this place. So we have to get this.
Right.
Everyone has their own needs. So we'll do that. Yeah, I mean, that's,
Insurance?
Oh, insurance. So we are not in network with any insurance, which I'm sure you're not surprised. It's very hard
Yeah,
to
but
get
out
that
of
to happen.
except out
We
of
do
network
we do out of net, right? So we give out super bills with all the codes and all that, and people
Okay.
can submit it to their insurance.
Okay.
So that's also very
Okay.
popular.
Great. And where in Brooklyn are you?
We're in Midwood, like Flatbush area, right on Avenue M and East 13th.
Okay.
Are you using any equipment to check the nervous system, or is it more of just?
So
a
it's
verbal
really
thing?
more, observation of how the system works, how the person postures, what postures are available to them. When we see people, for example, who have poor rotation, so they move stiffly like this, right? That indicates to us lots of things developmentally. And
Mhm.
also that almost always comes with social issues, executive functioning, learning disabilities. You'll almost always see that paired with that. So the question is why, right? So, and the answer is because the same thing that develops that rotation in movement, rotation in body, separation of the upper and lower, parts of the body
Mhm.
leads to those skills developmentally. So
Okay.
we do a lot of work like that. Yeah, but
So
it's a very human based type of work.
So that 550 for the initial evaluation is with the person, with the child.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's for about an hour,
So it's an hour and a half.
hour and a half.
And then
And-
the follow-up
yeah.
sessions are.
Right. So that hour and a half, the reason it's so long is because I use it. We could probably do the assessment in 15, 20 minutes, but I feel like people are coming not just for me to learn about you, but it's an educational tool.
Yeah.
So people can understand a lot of what I explained to you today. I'll explain in the evaluation. And I should say, like, we do have toys and all of these things, but they're in the closet. We bring them out as we need them and then we put them away. It's like, I feel strongly about that. So.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the follow, just like,
Yeah.
the 550 for the consultation, and then after that, if people were coming once a week or twice a week, what is the
Right,
cost
so
per
I'll
people?
say it's all the prices are online, so I feel like I don't know when people will watch the
Okay.
video. But we, at this time,
Yes.
our prices are $215 an hour for pediatric, $255 for over 18.
Okay,
And that could change
It
as
could
time
change,
goes
yeah.
on.
today,
Um,
May is May.
May something.
15,
Mid-May
2023.
2023. Yeah, but we do put the prices online. I feel like, I know a lot of people don't, but I feel like everyone should just know, like, just know.
No, just so
So,
you can deal with
yeah,
it.
and like if this works for
Check
you.
with their
So,
insurance first and,
Right.
out of network.
Right.
Well, this has been so informative.
Oh, thank you for having me.
so
I know
much.
it's such a great
Thank you.
audience.
It's
Also.
really great. We have handouts
And
and
then we have a link that actually, if you could put it in the chat.
yes, so we'll put it, I'm gonna put it, once you have the link for it, I will send it to the entire group of
Oh,
six
okay.
hundred and sixty families,
Okay,
along with the video. I'm gonna
Okay.
send the video of your presentation with the
Okay.
link. So any other information that you wanna give me,
Yeah.
part of that, it will go out to everyone.
Yeah. And if anyone has questions, really, like I do leave time in my schedule for consultations and all that. I'm happy to help people and also guide them towards all the therapy. And I should say also a lot of our clients. What was that?
Can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so I have a child who has, among other diagnoses, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Right.
And I'm wondering how maybe this is like not an appropriate question for like a big Q&A, but I'm wondering how your approach, like how your modalities would approach that. And I'm wondering also about
Did you just go out?
We lost you.
Well, we can start to talk about Ehlers-Danlos a little, like I
Okay.
said, like just as it would be relevant to everyone. So Ehlers-Danlos is a connective tissue disorder. So there's a lot of joint hypermobility and things like that. So we can build up the proprioception in the system. I hope that she's still listening. We can build up the proprioception in the system without needing to stress the joint. So there are ways that we can do even like a gentle type of joint traction without stressing the joint. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, and we recorded it. She's not.
Yeah.
She's Spanish for some reason. Any
Okay.
other questions before we end? All right, well, thank you so
Amazing.
much.
Thank you for
And
having
thank
me.
you.
This was really
Thanks for
nice.
everyone online for attending, and we're gonna stop the recording. Have a great weekend. Or actually, people are still here. I just stopped the recording.
Has like the washing the dishes there. That's like the relaxing thing.